The Pi network is in the middle of a lawsuit filed by one of its former CEOs. In this lawsuit, Vince McPhillip filed a civil case with 3 main complaints against Pi. He felt that he was wrongfully terminated by the company by the other members. He felt that he suffered emotional distress because of the reckless action of the 2 other members. And he also felt that there was a breach of fiduciary duty by the other 2 individuals. Since this initial document was filed, there has been a series of responses from both parties. In this video, we'll take a look at the response from the Pi network against these allegations and analyze whether or not this lawsuit can ever take the project down. To be clear, this video will focus more on the business side of the Pi network. Mainnet for Pi is still scheduled to be released by the end of this year. An application will be built on top of the blockchain and the price will also be determined. This means that we'll still have a couple more months to earn Pi before the actual release. Keep in mind that this project is 100% free. Just make sure to download the app from the App Store and also to use the invitation code MAGICTUNA. For more cryptocurrency content, make sure to subscribe to the channel and let's get started with this video. One thing you have to keep in mind is that this is actually a civil lawsuit and not a criminal one. Vince is not accusing the project of any criminal wrongdoing. Instead, he's accusing the company of wrongdoing against him personally. You should know that the end goal of any civil lawsuit is always recovery for the damage suffered. In this situation, Vince mainly wants compensation and also the cost of his lawyers to be paid for. As a response, the Pi network has commented on this set of accusations. With all the information we currently have, I doubt that Vince is going to be able to take the network down with this lawsuit. Instead, if he wins the case, he's simply going to be made whole. In other words, the money paid out to him must be reasonable, and I don't think the payout will be enough to bankrupt a multi-million-dollar company worth over $80 million. Therefore, the question we should all be asking now is whether or not he even has a chance at winning this lawsuit. In the remainder of this video, I want to examine how Pi plans to defend itself against this lawsuit. This is the first set of responses from the network, and I think it's going to be pretty interesting to take a look at. One thing you're going to quickly notice is that Vince has since amended his original complaint against the network. On October 22, 2020, Vince dismissed the 2 emotional distress charges he filed against Pi. Instead, he's now suing for wrongful termination, breach of fiduciary duty, and also breach of good faith and good dealing. I'll talk more about this in later parts of this video, but to refresh everybody's memory, these are the facts of the case told by Vince. He states that Dr. Kokkalis and Dr. Feng had unfortunately mixed personal issues with business issues. There were cases of screaming, shouting, and exhibits of physical aggression in the workplace. From this, Vince says he was traumatized and had to receive mental health counseling, which impaired his ability to act as a CEO. He believes also that this puts the company at risk and lowered the overall morale in the office. On April 22, 2020, Vince needed to get away from what he described as a hostile work environment. However, during his absence, Vince was needed to resolve an issue with a consultant. Dr. Kokkalis sent Vince an email requesting him to help concerning intellectual property and also marketing material. In this email, it also contained a bit about the company's decision to issue more shares. And when Vince saw this, he interpreted it as the other members trying to dilute his equity in the company. Vince believed that they knew he could not invest because of the personal conflict between the 2 sides. And he later ended up not investing at all into the project. And I suspect that this diluted his ownership of the company from 33% all the way down to just 3%. What I said so far is a super condensed version of what actually happened. Vince is now suing the company for constructive discharge / wrongful termination, breach of fiduciary duty, and also a breach of good faith and good dealing. Basically, he's saying that he was forced to resign because of the hostile work environment or terminated unfairly. The other members issued shares below market value and acted against him. And finally, the stock dilution was unfair and was not acting in good faith or fair dealing. In the remainder of this video, we'll take a look at how the defendants or Pi have responded to these allegations. In the document, they first responded to the constructive discharge or wrongful termination accusations. You should know that constructive discharge is when an employee is forced to resign due to intolerable working conditions. And in their own words, Pi have called the constructive discharge claims fatally deficient. They cite that the plaintiff or Vince is not entitled to work in a stress-free environment, and also that even though Vince accused him of constructive discharge, he didn't actually resign from the company. By definition, Vince needs to prove a hostile work location sufficiently and extraordinarily egregious to overcome the normal motivation of a competent person to win this case. In other words, he needs specific examples of how the company made his life a living nightmare. This is hard to do unless he can show the judge concrete evidence of things beyond what is considered to be a normal workplace. We all know that the jobs that we work isn't always going to be stress-free, and this is exactly what the Pi network countered with. Pi also says that the company never did anything wrong to be considered wrongful termination, For example, they say that witnessing marital issues is at best a stressful work environment and not a cause for a lawsuit. In addition, the company cites that Vince trying to resolve interpersonal disputes is really a part of a CEO's responsibility, and that really shouldn't amount to a hostile workplace. Apart from this defense, the company also mentions that Vince never declared that he actually resigned in his original complaint. They said that Vince seems confused at whether the whole thing is constructive discharge or whether or not the whole thing is actually wrongful termination. Pi is basically saying that Vince seemed a little confused about whether he left or if he had been fired. Lastly, the company also mentions that Vince never really mentioned how he was harmed by the company. They state that Vince only declared that he needed to get away and that was simply not enough to merit harm. For example, he needs to state how he suffered actual damage like income or benefits. If we can sum up this whole defense, Pi is basically saying that Vince seems a little confused about whether he was fired or if he had resigned. Vince never even mentioned how he was harmed. And lastly, what he calls a hostile work environment should be considered normal workplace stressors. The next claim against Pi is a breach of fiduciary duty, or the Pi network did not act in the best interest of Vince. Vince cites that Dr. Kokkalis and Dr. Fang sold shares to themselves below the fair value of those shares while they were all in the midst of a legal fight. Pi responds to this claim in two ways. They say that Vince really has no right to bring up this case because under Cayman Island laws, the directors have a duty to the company and not to the individual shareholders like Vince. They also said that everybody's stock was diluted and not just his. In addition to this, Pi believes that there wasn't any breach of fiduciary duty here. Vince was given the same opportunity just like everyone else. For example, he was invited to purchase the same amount of shares for the same price. Therefore, this can't really be considered a breach of loyalty or self-interest. He was basically given a chance to invest, yet he turned the opportunity down. He made a personal choice not to do so, and it shouldn't result in a lawsuit. The issuance of new shares affected everybody, not just Vince. Basically, the defense here is to say that the dilution was not targeting Vince individually. In addition to this, Vince was also asked to join and not kept out of the meeting. He made the personal choice not to invest, and he was never legally excluded from this transaction. The last claim against Pi is a breach of good faith and fair dealing. In other words, Vince claims that the equity issuance was not only against the interests of Vince, but it was also unfair to him. Instead, they said that the defense used for the last claim also worked for this one. They again repeated that Vince was never excluded from the transaction and the terms that Vince received were exactly the same as other members. Again, Vince had the same opportunity, said no, and should now take responsibility for his actions and not blame others. Overall, these are the three main claims against the Pi network filed by Vince. I'll make sure to explore more of this in the future. These lawsuits can be a pain to read, so make sure to like and subscribe to this channel. I'll update you guys more about this content in my future videos. In the meantime, make sure to check out some of my free offers below at no cost to you. Keep in mind that Vince still has a chance to respond to Pi, and this is not a full picture of the entire arguments. I'll make sure to make a video about his responses to what Pi just said in a future video. Nevertheless, thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you guys are having a great week, and like always, I'll see you guys again next time.